always fun to see where people are. I am coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin. Where are you at? We'll give people a minute to get to sign in. And oh, David from Denver. Hello, hello. Oh my gosh, somebody's dialing in from Berlin. This is so exciting. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. There's just people from all over the world. I'm not sure how that makes me feel. Definitely Tel Aviv, Australia, Germany again, England, Evanston, Illinois. Oh my gosh, Seoul, Korea, near and dear to my heart. Oh my gosh, South Africa. This is crazy. Oh my gosh. Well, welcome everybody to Collab Continued. We have an hour to spend together today, so I want to really get started. We have every minute booked. So let me start with introducing myself. My name is Julie Norvaisas. I am the VP of Research here at Dscout. My pronouns are she, her. I'll give you a little visual description of myself. I am sitting in my home office coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin, as I said. I am a white middle-aged woman with long dark hair and glasses. I'm wearing a colorful shirt with some wave pattern on it, and my office is filled with books, and you might see cats running around. It's definitely a reflection of the chaos and clutter of my mind back here. You'll see concert posters, etc. We encourage you to participate in the chat. I really, really want this to be an interactive session. I want to hear everybody's hope, streams, thoughts, and reactions as we share our content today. I'm not going to assume that everybody knows a lot about Dscout. So real quick, here at Dscout, we like to call ourselves people nerds first and foremost. And we see our tools as helping businesses stay human. Our platform offers a variety of research options across and beyond the product development lifecycle to help people capture human insights from in-context moments. More about all of that later. But welcome to Collab Continued. So why do we say Collab Continued? Well, Collab itself, the conference, took place in October. It was the very first collab that we had. And this week, we're replaying some of the content from those sessions, which was always our intention. So I'm so excited that this day has finally come. At the collab conference, we had about 80 leaders gather in Chicago from UXR and also from adjacent fields, such as product design, market research, strategy. We had some academics in the house. So we really tried to get a little bit beyond our bubble. And people left the conference feeling reconnected, rejuvenated, energized, inspired. And so that's how we want you to feel after you leave the sessions this week. And we want to get real. One of the things that you'll hear a lot over the next few days are the concepts of provocations. We really wanted to not just have the same conversations over and over again, but really provoke each other with new ideas and new ways of thinking and reframes of some of the old problems that we face, which, let's face it, there are some. We also wanted to talk about orthodoxies. What's an orthodoxy? And we'll talk a little bit more about that after the replay, but these are strongly held beliefs that we kind of become invisible to us, but they dictate the way that we behave and the way that we act. So what are those for our field? What are things that we would say UXR will always ... or UXR will never ... Think about that stuff as you're listening today and drop them in the chat. And like I said, we'll engage with that a little bit more later too. The other big word that we talked about a lot during collab was revitalize. We want to provoke each other. We want to think differently. We want to flip some orthodoxies together and come up with new ideas on how to revitalize our industry. It's time. There are some challenges. There are so many opportunities for us right now. What do we need to do collectively to revitalize the field? So excited to engage in that conversation all together today. So Collab Continued starts today. Hello, here we are. We're going to replay the keynote that I gave on the state of UXR. I'm sorry, the landscape of UXR, a little slight but important distinction there. And then I will be joined by Katie Johnson from Johanna Panasonic Well afterwards to talk a little bit more deeply about orthodoxies. Tomorrow is a 3-hour session. We're really excited. We have so much great content to share. We're going to do replays of the panel discussions that we had. And those topics range from flexibility of our practice, anatomy of a team, so organizational structures. A session we called From Post-it Notes to Balance Sheets. So how do we think about doing a better job of proving ROI and value? And super importantly, we had a panel on gaining and not losing momentum on ethics and inclusion and integrity in our practice. So much great content and a lot of back and forth between all the panelists. Panelists include Marissa Delaney from Acorns, Greg Burstein from Hearst, Joey Jacob from Wattpad, Carl Vredenberg from IBM, Roy Opata Allende from Zapier, Alba Villamil from Humanity Centered, Jonathan DeFaveri from Headspace, Lisa Gooding from Ipsos, Greg Marinelli from Chase, and Todd McCullough from Vanderbilt University. So an incredible lineup of panelists for you to learn from tomorrow. So I hope you can tune in for that. Wednesday, we have a 2.5-hour session on the UX of AI, the hot topic, right? Everybody's talking about, and rightfully so, the implications of generative AI on our practice, on our products, and on our planet. We have 6 lightning talks to share, to replay. Meredith McDermott from Duolingo, Liz Jurganen from Amazon Web Services, Karen Eisenhower from Dscout, Katie Johnson, again, from Johanna Panasonic Well, Kevin Johnson, who's our head of ML and AI here at Dscout, and Dscout CEO Michael Winnick, all sharing keynotes and highlights from the panel discussion that followed. So don't miss that one. And on Thursday, if you're interested in learning more about Dscout and Dscout's products, you'll definitely want to tune in for Thursday when Jonathan Fairman, our head of product, is going to talk about like some of the key 2023 releases that we had, including our usability product, which we're so excited about, and private panels, which is a game changer, and then 2024 roadmap trends. So what you expect to see from Dscout in 2024, and as well as touching on how we deliver great participants. So much to be discussed over the next few days. I want to just emphasize again that you could treat this as a lean back moment and just take in this great content. There certainly is a ton to share, but I really encourage you to participate. I really strongly believe that a room full of leaders talking about topics in a vacuum is not leadership at all. So we need to hear what you think, whatever your position, whatever your industry even. We hope there are people, non-UXRs here on the stream. Shout out in the chat if you're in an adjacent field. We'd welcome you. We'd love to hear your perspective. So please get involved in the chat. We are here to engage with you. All right, so my keynote. On the first day of CoLab, I shared this keynote that you're about to see, where I share some job and market data, some analysis of chatter going on in the field in 2023, some of the highlights of that, as well as results from a series of surveys that we launched here using Dscout's Express tool. And I'm very excited to share with you an art historical analysis of one of the questions in that survey. So I'm not going to say more than that right now. But, in the keynote, you'll see we encourage people to get beyond the same old conversations, to learn from each other, challenge each other, take accountability for the future with hope in our hearts and conviction for the road ahead. The road continues to be bumpy. I know that layoffs are continuing to happen. I just saw some announcements today. We're all affected by the turbulence right now. So I don't want to be rose-colored glasses, but I do want us to reflect together, and again, with this notion of revitalizing and reimagining our field together. So it was always my intention, like I said, to engage as many people as possible in this conversation. So I am super excited to replay it today for you. And with that, and one more plug to chat away, and especially if you don't agree with something that I'm saying, or you have a different view on something, please don't be shy and put it in there. And I will hand it over to our wonderful marketing leader, Katie Hickey, to hit play. And I will see you on the other side. It's about 30 minutes long. So looking forward to chatting and seeing you in 30 minutes. It is so incredible to look out at this group of people. So many people I've worked with over the years in my career, starting back at Dublin and Delve, back in the olden days, you know who you are, all the way through my time consulting in San Francisco. And then ultimately at LinkedIn. So many of my friends and colleagues from LinkedIn are here representing that era of my career. And I've already had a chance to meet so many of you yesterday that I've heard about, but never had a chance to meet. So it's just really incredible to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces. And of course, my colleagues here at Dscout, where I am now VP of Research. I've been here for about 7 months. And it's, I'm sorry, everybody else, but the best job in the world, because I get to study researchers. Researchers are my favorite people. Don't tell my family. Actually, my family is also here, and they are researchers as well. So it is legitimately true that my favorite people are researchers, research leaders in the research community, and I'm so passionate about working on a product and a series of products that are designed to help unlock the potential of researchers and research teams and help us do the really important work that we do in the world. Graham talked about empathy, but our work is so important. And I really just have always believed that from the beginning, and I'm really excited to be up here representing Dscout today and kicking off our conference with a few, hopefully thought-provoking remarks. I'm going to be sharing a little bit of jobs data, talking about that for the UXR market. I'm going to be sharing some thoughts on the discourse that we've been having in the UXR over the past year or so, and then sharing some results from a study that we did on the UXR landscape. You'll see pie charts, there will be quotes, all the exciting things that researchers have come to love. It's all designed to kind of inform and provoke conversations and the content of the CoLab conference today and tomorrow. So while our event focuses on UXR, as I've been saying, we don't live in a bubble. We're not in a bubble, right? We're part of a community of people that we work with, different stakeholders, business, strategy, product, design, engineering, et cetera, market research, other insights for branches. We're all bubbles kind of floating around together. Colliding at times in a friendly way. But, also, related to bubbles, like there's a lot up in the air right now for UXR. There's a lot of things that are challenges. There's Gen AI, there's the job market, which has presented its challenges. We'll talk about that. And we've all come here to talk about things that matter. But we've also all been to conferences before. Why is this one different? Why are we here together, so excited to be here together? Well, I'm going to walk through in classic researcher style a couple of quotes that I think, I cherry-picked, that I think illustrate the intentions of why I'm here, why we put this conference together, and what I hope we can bring into the day. So these quotes come from, I'm going to talk more about this survey and the survey results later, but a survey that was conducted on Dscout's Express product a couple of months ago. And the quotes I'm going to share were in response to a question. Imagine yourself walking into a museum and you see a painting, and that painting depicts the state of UXR right now. What do you see? Paint us a picture. So the first quote I want to share is this one. I see us sitting in an inflatable pool that we think is the size and stability of the in-ground pool in the background next to ours. We write the same articles and have the same discussions year after year without advancing our profession. How does this make you feel? A little sad? I read every one of these quotes that came through.
I felt like I bristled at this. I was like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, we have advanced our profession. I mean, I've been around for a while and we certainly have. But I think I also bristled a little bit because there's a little truth to it. That like, yeah, I have been to a lot of conferences and I've written a lot of articles. And, you know, I think we can do more to advance our profession. So I also found it like bristling, but in an inspiring way, if that makes sense. The second one I want to share is very, very different, paints a really different picture, which also really resonates with me. My landscape is a pure playground. We have interesting topics. We have curiosity. We have excitement about technology. We have interest and acceptance from the companies that we work for. This evokes a very different feeling, paints a really different picture. And then here was a comment where I was called out specifically, which always is interesting. I think reflecting is good and hard. I think UXR was a gold rush. I wonder how to think about the responsibility or accountability that people like me have for this. That one made me pause, because we all do have personal accountability for the state of UXR and for the future of UXR, which is what we're all here to talk about today. So I wrote an article. I was part of one of these many articles that we write. And these are kind of the bold questions that I pose in there that really kind of catalyzed this conference, actually, and kind of what we want to do here. What do we need to do today, tomorrow, and then in the future to rethink, solve, abandon, attempt in order to continue to thrive? What do we need to do to revitalize our field? So this is kind of what I've synthesized as the intentions for a collab, right? Let's activate the power of our collective curiosity and creativity. Let's add, let's dream big and build onto that playground, create that for people. Let's subtract, let's say goodbye to things that don't serve us anymore, ways of thinking. Let's act, let's take personal responsibility for the actions that we took in the past and the actions that we're going to take in the future for our industry. Let's expand beyond UXR. You know, I think we have a lot of people in the room. We welcomed a lot of people to our conference who aren't UXR. Folks. So raise your hand if you're not in UXR. This is wonderful. We need your perspectives. We need you to kind of give it to us straight. Talk to us about how we can become better. And be free, right? Let's, like Graham was saying, let's learn from the past, but not dwell in it. Let's not get stuck in old loops and old ways of thinking. All right, with that, I'm going to transfer to talking a little bit about some jobs data, some lessons from our bubbles. Many of you have seen this data before, actually. It's beautifully visualized by our design team here, but this is many thanks to Catherine Brookshire of Indeed for the data that she's been putting out on the UXR field. And what this indicates, actually, is that the red is research. The other smaller lines are our partners, software engineering, product managers, design, our kind of most common partners. And you can see from 2018, and actually this growth started in 2013, steady growth, dipped down in COVID during that that horrible time, and then we exploded, right? Like it was just bananas. And then, you know, we all know what happened. But what's interesting about this, I think it tells us a couple stories. One is about growth, obviously. One is about proportionality. I think we tell ourselves that research is growing at a slower or same rate as our partners, but we seem to actually be growing a little bit faster, according to this data. And so our ratios are improving, which is really great. And it also tells us we're not alone, right? We're not the only ones who are impacted by these waves. And I think there's obviously a few basic things that contribute to our growth. One is supply. There's just a lot of PhD pivots, which I talk to people like that all the time, boot camps, HCI programs, design MBAs, so many different programs that are bringing people into our field. Our field draws the most interesting people. Like, it's just incredible, the diversity of thought that's brought into our field. So supply is just exploding. Demand and value have also been hugely exploding. I think demand comes from more and more and more companies are, whatever you want to call it, customer obsessed, user focused, human centered, whatever you call it. Like, there's just a lot more demand at the executive level and at all levels of the company for really listening and paying attention to and understanding your users in a way that wasn't before. And then there are disastrous projects that have happened, and I'm not going to look at anybody in the room because I know stories, but where things got launched into the world and they were just a mess, and research gets called in to clean that up, and lessons have been learned. And I think a lot of big tech companies in particular have learned a lot of lessons in this way. So there's been a lot of demand, and therefore our value has been increasing as well. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit more on this like popping bubble that just happened. This tells us, this data is also from Indeed, that UXR job postings have dropped 71%. So we've all heard about layoffs. You know, this is just data that emphasizes exactly what happened there. So I started thinking about bubbles. And of course, I did research on bubbles because who wouldn't among us? And I learned a little bit about kind of the phases of this is a financial bubble, a Beanie Baby craze, any kind of bubble goes through these phases. There's kind of the stealth where that was for UXR, that was about 2010, where people were like, oh, this UXR thing's pretty cool. Like, let's get some of these people on our team. In 2010, 2020, there was like awareness. That's that kind of, there was some steady growth, really steady growth building. 2020 to 2022 was like mania. You heard the term irrational exuberance. That's what was happening. It's very hard to know when you're in that moment. It just feels like everything is going to be like gangbusters forever. You know it's not, but it feels like it will be, and that's how people behave. And then there's what's called a blow-off period, which is kind of what we've been experiencing this year, right? Like the job market just dipped completely. People freaked out. There's a lot of characteristics that happen in the blow-off period that we'll talk a little bit more about. And then, you know, happily, things tend to just regulate and kind of get back to normal. So in my kind of research that I did on this phenomenon, when we start to return to mean, which is what we're doing, and I want us to think about that, you know, this is basically a giant planning session for 2024 and beyond for our industry that we can start today, is we're going to return to mean. Things are going to stabilize. We're a big part of making sure that that happens and that we do so in a sustainable way for our industry. But, you know, this first one surprised me, this principle that is recommended, exercise emotional management. Right? It's very easy, and I think we saw a lot of emotions. Everybody was up in their feelings this year, but we need to just calm down and like take it slow, take it steady. Look for opportunities, learn, support the fundamentals of what is happening. And then I think this one is interesting too, create protective mechanisms and regulations. It's more of a financial thing, but like, how do we think about that as we return to mean? And then of course, learning lessons and sharing out. So speaking of emotional management, myself, many others in this room had a lot of hot takes this year on UXR and like, what is up? Lots of blame going around, lots of themes emerged from my analysis of the discourse. I read lots of posts and articles and comments and all the comments, oh my gosh. There was a couple themes that came up, leadership failures, so that's leadership of UXR. Right, like Judd Anton's famous UXR, The Reckoning is Here, talked about we spent too much focus on middle projects, not enough on strategic projects, and not enough on usability, evaluative projects. We're stuck in the middle. But also there was some blame placed on design leadership, on executive leadership. Gen AI came up as a big theme that was kind of a big threat to us. Our habits, like there was some talk about like, is design thinking a bad habit? Is it like the theater of UX? We're too reliant on imaginative workshops and not enough on business acumen. Things like that. Some quality issues. Do we really have quality standards for the work that we do? Is that something that we talk about or should be talking more about? And then some trends like democratization. Like democratization has come back to haunt us in this time. There was a lot of conversation about that, as well as remote work, the implications of remote work and remote working and remote research, which haven't really been reckoned with yet. So these are the messages I pulled like from the bursting bubble, right? Like what can we take from that if we manage our emotions a little bit better? What I pulled out from that, and I'd be curious to hear from others, like what you thought as you read a lot of this stuff, which I'm sure you did. We need to mature UXR leadership and consider some major shifts. It's time to do that. We need to build a lot more business discipline. We need to take an active stance and provide direction on Gen AI. We're talking a lot about that tomorrow, but the field is really, really hungry for this. We do need to think about offering conclusive guidance on democratization and remote work, especially democratization. The discourse on that is lingering. How can we advance that? And then kind of doubling down on quality and integrity was a big theme as well. So those are all things I want you to bring forward into the day. And with that, I'm going to shift to a little bit of a deeper dive into our study that we did. And I'm going to talk about kites for a minute. We talked about bubbles. I love bubbles. I'm a huge fan of bubbles. Who isn't? Anybody not like bubbles? They're beautiful. They're ephemeral. They just kind of do their own thing. You never know when they're going to explode, or maybe you do. I don't know. That's a fun game. When's the bubble going to explode? But kites, they also are subject to the wind, right? They respond to conditions, but they're tethered to the ground. They're structured. They're still beautiful. They're reusable. We can control them. I just kind of got into kite flying recently, and it's a really, if you haven't done it in a while, go do it. It's a really cool thing. You can hold the string, you feel the air above it, and you can kind of control where that kite's going to do. And I think that's I want to kind of carry that metaphor into the day. Like, we're not bubbles. Let's get out of our bubbles. Let's quit floating around out there. Let's think more about kites. Kites is a team effort. We got to build the kite together, fly it together. And sometimes, it's not a good day to fly a kite. You got to look up and be like, no kite flying today. Conditions are not favorable. So you have to be a little bit more intentional as well. So just a little poem about kites for you there. But okay, as I get into the study results, here's another quote from the study that reflects that people are thinking about the same thing that we're thinking about. What's next? Is it just a reboot? Are we rebound? Are we going to go right back up into this crazy growth? Everything I've read about bubbles suggests not, that's not what's about to happen. Are we going to just kind of correct back onto course? Maybe. Are we going to reboot completely? Probably a combination of the latter. What was interesting, even amidst all the very real challenges facing the industry right now, one of the questions we asked, and you can see a little bit about where this data came from, but surprisingly optimistic, right? It's really cool to see. Another question that we asked was about, these were open-ended questions. What are UXR's greatest strengths and what are UXR's greatest challenges? This to me is really interesting. Our top strength, the value of our insights. By the way, AI helped me tag these. Where's Kevin? Thank you. The top challenge is the value and impact to the business. So we value our insights, but we're not sure that the business values our insights. So there's some tension there for us to pull on. The second one, our strength, collaborative and objective. Cool. Top two challenge, strategic influence of insights. So are we too collaborative and objective to be real strategic partners? When you think about strategy, you think about opinions, you think about real coalitions, things like that. Are we playing that game? I don't know. The third one, human and user-centered and empathetic, obviously, is in tension with our third challenge, Gen AI and new technologies, where what is it to be human? What is the relationship between the work that we do with people? Are we even going to know who people are anymore? We're already seeing that with some participants. So our strengths and our challenges live in tension. So then we asked a closed-ended question, and this is very relevant to this group because these questions were asked specifically to guide the content of this conference. So the first top thing that people wanted us to talk about, integrating across insights teams. So getting out of our bubble, working with market research, data science, different insights branches. Lots to say about that. The second one, business impact and ROI. Need I say more? We're going to have lots of conversations about that today. The third one, LLMs, Gen AI, and other tech advancements. Check. And the fourth one, stakeholder and executive influence. So those were the top 4. On the left, you can see inclusive research, organ reporting structures, and democratization appeared as well. The ones in gray appeared, but we're not going to be covering them today. We just made a decision that that's not what this conference is about. So then, of course, because a closed-ended question is great, but what's better than a closed-ended question? An open-ended question. So I asked one of those too. And that one was, what are your burning questions for UXR leadership? So these are the questions for you and for us as we move forward. The quote on the left is kind of encapsulates what people want to say and know from us. How do you think the discipline will evolve in the next 10 years? Real talk, no BS. And the quotes that you read, there are so many more, and I hope I actually get to share them with you because I think you'll find them really interesting. One is about business value. What metrics or methodologies do you recommend for the direct impact of UXR? Where's Kevin? Kevin thinks a lot about this. Yes, high five. Transparency, who are you? What power do you think you have? Who is UXR leadership? Was a big theme that came up. I find that very interesting. Integrity, ethics, and inclusion came up, super important to me and to all of us, I know. Org structures, why don't we report to product? Why do we hide under design? How do you make the case for UXR? What are you willing to change? And finally, technology. So you start to see themes emerge. These are, this is all stuff we're going to be talking about today. All right, but before we do that, indulge me. We're going to take a little stroll through the UXR Museum. I talked a little bit earlier about this question that we asked, and I, of course, did a symbolic and textual analysis of every response to this question, and let me tell you, it was totally mind-blowing. And I came up with some themes that I think are going to be really interesting, right? If we had the closed-ended question, the open-ended question, which were about like the mind, what is the mind thinking? This is really about what the heart is feeling. What does it feel like to be in UXR right now? And a reminder, these were mostly ICs. We had some consultants, freelancers, and frontline managers as well. So I excluded leadership from these results. So are you ready? This combines my 2 favorite things, art history and research. So I'm very excited. All right, the first kind of metaphor that came out really strongly, and it brings me no joy to share this with you today, but was kind of war and battle metaphors, kind of us against them, I've been calling it. I'm not going to read the quote altogether, but this, I'm sure that we're all having a lot of feelings about this. I know I did when I saw it. And again, I think it's one of these that it makes me feel uncomfortable, but it also like resonates with me because I feel like I've used and thought in these ways sometimes myself. I'm not a fan of battle language at all in business. I don't like it when we're talking about killing it and stuff like that. Like, I'm a pacifist. I don't like this at all. But I think we do need to pay attention to like, this is a way that people are feeling, right? They feel embattled. And that's really bad because when you feel that way in the workplace, you put up armor, you feel defensive, you think people are your enemies. People are not your enemies. So that we have to try to get away from that. The second big theme that came up, and this was, I should have said I'm moving from most dystopic to least dystopic. So just stay with me. The second big theme was about the landscape as a threat. And there was a lot of this, you all. We had unfriendly soils, volcanoes, earthquakes, fires, cliffs and canyons, impassable mountains. Just a lot of like, this is a well-known theme in art history too, right? Like the smallness of mankind, humankind in the expanse of nature, right? And that's a beautiful theme. That's something important for us to consider as human beings, and I love thinking about it. But in the workplace, that feeling that there are forces beyond your control that are going to subsume you or are threatening to you is not a good one. That relates to feelings of like helplessness, doom, burnout, anxiety, or the feeling that we can just overcome it, right? or we have sheer grit. We're the little people in the boat against the tidal wave, like, come on, keep rowing, you know, this feeling that like scrappiness is gonna get us by and help us survive. The third big theme that came out was distortion. Work feels disorienting. Things that made sense don't make sense anymore. They've morphed, they've changed. I'm a big fan of surrealism, psychedelic art, and questioning reality, believe me. But in the workplace, not great, not great. Most of the references around distortion came up in relation to AI. So that's a distorting effect. That's having a distorting effect to people. And when that happens, you know, that's a feeling that creates anxiety. That creates anxiety and maybe being overly cautious, like, this doesn't make sense to me, I better stay away from it. That's just how the brain is wired. Another one was abstraction as expression. There's a lot of different kinds of abstraction, but this is more of a violent expression, right? Like, just get it all out there. Abstraction comes from a lot of, I studied art, abstraction as an art historian, kind of the move from realism to abstraction. And there were a lot of kind of things that contribute to that, like the futility of reality. Why even bother trying to describe reality? Like, what is it even? I'm just gonna put out my emotions. There's a feeling of wanting to like express your inner emotion, your inner landscape. Forget about the outer landscape. I'm just gonna like talk about what's going on inside of me. It's embodied in gestural, which is really, really cool, actually. But the traps of this, and I think what this tells me when I think about this as a theme that UXRs are feeling out in the world, is it tends to kind of become inward-looking and over-intellectualizing, which is not, you know, I think we tend to over-intellectualize anyway. You know, that's just one of our things, but kind of interesting to think about that. And we start to get a little bit more kind of positive themes coming out in the pictures as well. People painted some really positive and interesting pictures. There's a big theme of emergence. You know, those pictures where like you can see it really clearly close up, but when you get far away, it becomes blurry, or the opposite. This idea that depending on your stance and your perspective, things either are in or out of focus, or that they're unfinished. The Vitruvian Man, it's a beautiful sketch, but it's just a sketch. We need to fill it in. So I really, really liked this motif more than anything of emergence. And then we had hope. I love this one. It's so real. I see a bunch of scattered confetti dots blown across the blue sky. That's us. Here we are. We're not bubbles, we're confetti, same kind of thing. But the blue sky feels like there's always a new day, right? There's hope. The UX landscape is a good one. And then we had a bunch of them that were like, I would call them futurism, like really painting the picture of who we want to be, who we can be, sometimes who we are, in fact. I love this one about the groups of researchers huddling, right? It's like, here we are huddled. This is us. We're huddling together, not over screens, with each other. Amazing. But engrossed in like deciphering things, figuring things out together. They're curious and determined, as we are all. We're bridging gaps between different disciplines. There's bridges in this painting. It's empathetic, and it's diverse, right? The diversity of the picture enriches the field. I just want to get a little bit of props. I used DALL-E to create this beautiful image based on this quote. I tried to put a kite in there. It didn't work. So picture a kite, if you will. It's red in my mind. But so these are kind of my takeaways of the messages from our collective unconscious. Let's practice active futurism, right? We need to tame the landscape, and I think we can do that by embracing a mindset of preparedness and sustainability, right? The landscape is, you've talked about this a little bit yesterday too, like climate change is becoming more and more real, more and more part of our conversations. Sustainability is a part of all of our conversations. What can we take from those practices and bring them to ours to think about a sustainable practice? Reduce distortion. This one we can do. Like, let's just tame some of the mysteries of AI. We have people here tomorrow who are going to help us to do that, help us to reduce this distortion field. We can manage our emotions. I think that's a big important one as we return to mean. Create clarity and resist this us versus them mentality. I deliberately, like I said, brought people to this conference who aren't UXRs so that we can't do that, you know? We can't do that. So are we ready to launch our kites into the day? Our return to mean year, this is just kind of a summary of the things that came out of my various analyses. And, you know, it's all about everything that we're doing, it all boils down to impact. And I'm really excited to bring up the panels and talk about how we're going to gather the themes that I talked about today and some of the other things that are important for us to talk about in our panels. And what we're going to do is I'm going to bring up pairs of panels. We're going to kind of give you some provocations, and then we're going to break out. And when you break out into your small groups, we have a simple framework for you to guide your conversation. First is describe, right? Everybody's curious about how does it work at your company? How does it work somewhere else? Describe how the themes that came up in the panel conversations affect your life and your work and your team. And then do is about what are you doing? What have you heard about that's being done to kind of help solve some problems in that space? And then dream, what is the 10-year plan? Like, where are we aiming? What's your picture of where we can take our field? And before I hand it back over to Graham and bring our first set of panels up, I want to, again, plant the seed of orthodoxies. Katie Johnson, where is she? And I will be leading a session at the end of the day around orthodoxies. But during the day today, I want you to think about your orthodoxies that you hold for UXR, whether you're in the field or not. Think about like UXR will always ... or UXR will never ... For me, an example of that is like, I thought UXR will always report to design. I firmly believe that. I had a strong conviction about that. I defended it, and now I don't report to design. And it's great, you know, and I know many of others of you don't as well. So like, that was something that I would have gone to the mat for as a strongly held belief, but I had to flip it and realize like there are other ways, there are better ways. So think, as you're having conversations today, think about like that. What are some beliefs that I have that like either I feel like we need to hold on to really tight and not lose, or that like, is this serving us anymore, this belief? Like UXR is slow. Is it? Does it have to be? Like, what if it wasn't? What if we were like, UXR is faster than you? Try to catch up with us. You know, what if we flipped that? So I want you to jot some of that stuff down during the day as you think about them, roll them around in your head, and then we're going to come back to them at the end of the day and work on flipping some of those.
Welcome back, everybody. Oh my gosh, was really fun to see all the different reactions. And I'm joined by Katie Johnson, who I just referred to and have mentioned several times now. Hi, Katie.
Hi, nice to see everyone. Thanks for the really
Yes.
great presentation, Julie. It was incredible to watch, even though I saw it once before. It's like wonderful to see it again. And I love what's going on in the chat.
I know. It's so great to see how people are responding and the questions. And, you know, I'm curious, Katie, like what stood out to you? I noticed a handful of people talking about we need to dig into business acumen and democratization and things like that. People who feel that way, please tune in tomorrow. There's a lot more in-depth conversation about those topics, a lot of provocations, all of those things. There was some interesting a lot of interesting kind of back and forth about scarcity versus abundance, which I think is really interesting and really important to me. There was a comment, and I'm not going to call it names because I don't remember all of them, and I don't want to like just be kind of partially giving people, but the question, who hurt you, you know, is a legitimate one. There is a lot to unpack here. And for those of you who this really resonates with, you know, hopefully you feel seen and inspired. And for those who you haven't felt these things, you know, stick around and learn a little bit more about kind of some of the dynamics in the field. It's super interesting. Katie, what stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, besides Luther, who I do remember telling us that this is all simulation, which, you know, just really great way to start a Monday. I think this constant call for more specificity is something that really continues to stand out to me. And I think it's real, right? You can't answer specifically all of the questions that all of us are asking in a keynote. You can't answer them even in a 2-day conference, it turns out, or a 3-day conference.
Right.
And I think that's where I'm really excited for People Nerd Slack to be a place where we can start sharing some of these success stories. And for me personally, like one of the biggest things that came out of Collab was one-on-one conversations where we get really specific about like, what are you doing? What am I doing? What's working? What failed? Where did I fall on my face? Right. Like, and what am I going to try next? And so I'm really excited to hear this kind of continued call for specificity. And I invite those who feel that craving for specificity to get specific with us in either People Nerd Slack or find us on LinkedIn. Let's do one-on-ones. That's where I personally find a lot of my own kind of, I feel sated by that, just being able to engage in those kinds of conversations and get specific. So never fear, I would say, to those crying for specificity. I also crave specificity, and we can get it together as this wonderful community.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I know there were a few people in the chat who were saying they've recently been affected by reductions in force or layoffs, and are looking to connect with people. People Nerd Slack is also a great forum for that. There are many, but a great place to share and get to know people. And one of the really gratifying things about Collab was so many people came to me afterwards and said, I met 2 or 3 people who I've maintained relationships with, and we've had one-on-ones, like Katie was saying. And that's harder to do in a virtual format like this, but hop on Slack, and that's, I think, a better way to keep some of these conversations going and make some of these connections. But yes, with that, Katie, we've alluded to orthodoxies. I did my best to kind of introduce the concept, but Katie, you do such a great job of this. Why don't you share with the group a little bit more about like, what is an orthodoxy? Why is it important that we look at them, and how do we use them kind of as a tool to progress our thinking?
Yeah, you always set me up really well, Julie. So thank you for doing that. Orthodoxies are really personal to me, and I can talk a little bit, I'll ad-lib a little bit about that momentarily, but first let's define what they are. So orthodoxies are deeply held, broadly shared beliefs, conventions about what drives success. And they're not, they don't come out of the sky, right? They come from having success over and over and over and over again. So we collectively learn, this is how we do things. This is how we enjoy success. This is how we reap rewards, right? But what happens is if you kind of go through life and you continue to have success in the same way, and you develop this really, sacred orthodoxy, you can get to a place where it's really hard to see kind of what they are. And it can cause you to not know that they have expiration dates. And if you don't check in on those expiration dates regularly, they can become extinct, or they can expire, and people can take over the space that you have held kind of for so long. So this is why we see big giant companies that don't challenge their orthodoxies regularly get challenged by new people that kind of arrive, like OpenAI frankly did last year, and challenged people like Google around this concept of what was working for their business, right? For me personally, I'll leave you with one story. I find that in my own practice, challenging orthodoxies has been really important. And as a young UXR, many, many, many moons ago, I found myself working for 6 months on something that was really big. It was one of my first big projects in agency life, and I was so proud of it. It was at the time the best work I'd ever done in my life. And 6 months later, I came to see the client and was checking in and was like, how have you guys used all the things that I taught you? And what did you learn about your people? And they were like, oh, that was really nice report, Katie. It's been in a drawer. We just don't really know what to do with it. Right. And poor young Katie, I have so much empathy for her. She was just devastated, right? And rightly so. But it changed how I practice forever. And what I learned from that experience is that it's important to re-examine how I changed my practice then, because it might not be relevant now. So that's a great kind of segue into talking about challenging orthodoxies from a UXR practice standpoint.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about like flipping them and like what that process looks like mentally, when you face something that you're like, first of all, you have to identify like, this is a strongly held belief that I have, and it may or may not be serving me anymore. Like, how do you kind of flip that?
Yeah, so the most common way to start is to literally just hyperbolically negate it, right? So like if you, for example, say like, this isn't exactly true about that report, but let's say I wrote the most objective, scientific, rigorous report that there possibly could have been, and it ended up in a drawer and changed nothing, right? Like, so the negating, the flipping, the hyperbolic version of that is like, what is the most subjective, like mind-changing thing that I could put in front of someone that is going to be a catalyst to the way that they behave next, right? Now, of course, I can hear the screams of the UXRs in the chat who are like, no, 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 that's not what we do. But the point of flipping the orthodoxy like that is to be hyperbolic, right? Is to be challenging. And then, of course, we work our way back to some middle ground that we feel safe in, right? That doesn't feel like it's completely perverting the practice we've worked so hard to build, but at the same time is different. So that's a great example of taking it and hyperbolically pushing it as far as you possibly can. So you did this in your keynote, right? When you said UXR is slow, and then you said, what if we were faster than you? Which I love. I love a provocative, engaging question like that. But that's how you do it. So you're already doing it. And I think a lot of us in the chat are able to do that if you just kind of almost make it a fun game.
Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of the active futurism thing, right? Of like the fact that we may perceive ourselves as slow or others perceive us as slow is very limiting. So like, let's imagine a world in which that isn't true, and then step back to like, what needs to be true, what needs to change in order for that to happen. And I know there was something in the chat just now about Gen AI and feeling like that might be a threat to our practice within organizations, but there's a world in which maybe it is an unlock for speed and quality. So I don't know, that's something for us all to think about and play with. We did this part of CoLab on the first day after the keynote and the panels was we did an orthodoxies exercise, and a bunch of people wrote them out, and we've done a little bit of analysis of them, but there was a couple more that I want to share with you. One was written out: UXR will always question what we're doing. We behave as if we believe we have no idea what we're doing. I didn't write this. I don't know. It just kind of was a little bit of a gut punch to me. And it was like, what if that wasn't true? What if UXR clearly articulated our purpose, process, and value, and our conversations within organizations were propulsive, not circular? Anybody who's been around for a while is probably has a logbook on their next to their desk of how many times they've had the conversation about what's the value of UXR, right? Like, can we stop having that conversation? What if UXR has had so much confidence? Yeah. Another one was UXR will never get the credit. We behave as if our impact is diffuse and others own it. There was a little bit in the chat about this earlier about jobs to be done and kind of repackaging what research does and taking credit for it in a way. And that's really hard too. But what if that weren't true? What if UXR's contributions were as clear to our partners as they are to us? What do we need to do to make that happen? A lot of, again, if you find these intriguing, like tune in tomorrow, because there's just going to be so much more specificity and also provocations for you. All will not be answered during that time.
That one hits me so deeply, because I literally just had a conversation with my boss last week about this concept of like, if you kind of go forward and you fail, if the product fails, right, it'll all come back to like the insights were wrong at the beginning, right? But if you go forward and you succeed, it'll be because you had this amazing team of folks who were building the product and, going to market and doing incredible marketing work and building incredible backends and all these kinds of things. And like the insights were perhaps just like the beginning of a beautiful journey of a huge collaborative team. But if the product fails, it will be because UX research failed, the insights failed, right? And man, I hope we don't think that, right? Like that is, we should reap as much reward as we are risking in the product process, right? So like we should stand to gain as much as we stand to lose. And it was an interesting conversation. So that one really hits me deeply this morning.
Yeah, there's already some great conversation in the chat. And what we're going to do.
Yes, I'm so excited to see the chat blowing up.
Take some of these topics and bring them over to Slack so we can really engage in them and other people can share their perspectives and respond. The affordances of this chat don't give us the ability to really do that. So let's keep that conversation going. I'm so excited about that. All right, so we have just a few minutes left. Katie, any other parting thoughts you wanted to share on on the keynote or on orthodoxies before we do a little bit of a wrap up here?
Yeah, I think just in general, like these things are hard to do, right? Again, like we build these orthodoxies in our heads because we've had success. So even us as researchers, we've had success, and it is really challenging to change behavior. We know that, right? Like even small habits take 21 days to build. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm committing to this group to be an active participant with you in challenging these orthodoxies and changing our behavior as we see fit. And I'm really, really excited to meet so many of you that are having this really rich conversation in the chat right now. I'm here for you. I'm going through it too. You are not alone. And just thank you for being in this really fantastic community with me. And thank you, Julie, for having me here.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. And I know that all the panelists who took part in the sessions that will be replayed tomorrow and on Wednesday feel the same way. Like we're all super excited to keep this conversation going and really, really committed to that. There are some questions about whether the transcript will be shared. Not sure, it's kind of a technical question, but what we will do, like I said, is maybe pull out some of the main themes and topics of that were happening in the chat and port them over to Slack. And I guess I need to start working on my zine about art historical analysis.
Yes, please. I can't wait to read it.
Sounds really fun. I also do want to give in credit and kudos to our marketing team, particularly the design team who created that presentation for me. It was just phenomenal to work with them on that. And where's the Slack channel? Great question. Colleen or Katie, can you share a link to the Slack in the chat? But also there's a QR code here, which will link you to the Slack. So yes, please, we hope to see you there momentarily. In fact, we'll be right there with you. So a reminder that tomorrow we start again at 10 a.m. Central, which is where I am, 11 Eastern. And that's going to be a 3-hour session. Today was just 1 hour, 3 hours. Get your coffee, get your snacks, tune back in. Really excited to engage with everybody in the chat again on all of these awesome topics and get a little bit more specific and more provocative. And with that, I think we will, unless Katie or Colleen, do you have any other housekeeping points that you wanted to make for the group before we close out with a fun Dscout sizzle reel? Bring up our energy a little bit? Nope. Okay, well, let's do it. Thank you all so much. Incredible to have so many people join us from around the world. And we hope very much to see you tomorrow for day 2 of Collab Continued. All right.
Right now, I am at my resort.
Right now, I'm in the grocery store.
I am walking around Home Depot.
Now I'm going for a little walk.
So getting ready to do some practicing.